Hey, I'm Naya. Welcome back to the channel. So today I decided to talk to you a little bit about what the people have been playing in side decks and main decks and what's been happening, because we have so many different things that we could be running in our side decks, and I just wanted to discuss some options with you and sort of the reasoning behind some of the cards that we've seen in different lists and what you could do, moving forward, what I will be doing moving forward, and just all of the texts and things that have been popping up here and there in the past couple of weeks. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's just get right into it. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to discuss with you is something that I've seen happen in the last probably couple weeks, and it's the fact that people have started to put in, myself included, going second, I'm just gonna call this going second power cards in the main deck. So Chalice, Droplet, obviously Droplet and then Chalice if you don't have Droplet, Dark Ruler, sometimes even evenly, and then the only other card I could see was like Impermanence that had like any sort of connection to the hand traps, because mostly, and I figured it's because of the Talents reprint. This is one of the reasons, because people have more access to it, hand traps play into it a lot more, and also hand traps just don't have that much impact. And it's so interesting, probably because of the power creep and everything, but hand traps just do not have that kind of impact anymore. Some of them still do, but yeah, it's what's been starting to happen, and I figured I would mention this first with the intent to point out that we're gonna have to adapt our side decks accordingly. Usually the side decks will be tailored towards us going second and using some of those cards in the side deck for that purpose. But since we have so many going second power cards in the main deck as of late, we're just gonna have to put in different cards in the side deck, and this is what we're gonna be discussing today, obviously. But another thing I wanted to point out was the fact that I don't personally feel that this is always the correct choice. Like sometimes hand traps do enough still. Like by all means, just run hand traps if that's what you feel suits your deck, suits your playstyle, and suits your meta, because it's not, end all be all because, just everybody does it and now we should all be doing it. It's like, no, people make choices according to, their meta and the decks that they are running. So just test everything. I still feel like some of the hand traps are okay, like Nibiru, like Gamma for example, or Droll if the meta is very specific, like the Drytron meta was, and now Lyrilusk gets punished by Droll like hardcore. So it's still okay, and it's something that should be tested out. Some lists, rarely, but some lists put in evenly matched in the main deck, which is I don't dislike it. I think it's cool because you can cut people off guard. You could cut people off guard, but it's very specific. So if you're beginning to test that, maybe just go with like Droplets or Dark Ruler and then go from there, and you're gonna see what suits you basically. And the other card I wanted to mention together with these, like in this category, because I split this entire video into categories just in my head so I could focus. And the card I wanted to mention was Pancratops, because it's so specific. It like sometimes it's just not good enough for the meta, and the card is awesome on its own. Like it's a very good card, and if it wasn't 3 it would probably be played way more, obviously, but in this meta in particular I don't feel like it's that bad. I feel like in theory it does the job. I have started to omit it from the side deck because it just wasn't doing enough for me, and I felt like I wanted to put some other cards in. But since most of the cards moved to the main decks, as I mentioned, and the side decks got freed up a bit, maybe try to run Pancratops again and see if that's what you like. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So the next thing I was thinking about was Backrow removal. So like sometimes, a meta comes where specifically you should be using different type of, Backrow removal. Sometimes we would specifically use Cyclones or Lightning Storms or Twin Twisters, and it's like, I guess you just need to make your choices accordingly. But I've seen that Backrow removal overall does not do that much anymore, in the sense of it doesn't impact decks because the meta is not that control heavy. Like everything is spiraling out of control into the combo meta direction. So I've seen like maybe 4 to 5 slots in the side deck being dedicated to Backrow removal, and what I specifically feel like would be a good choice is to play Lightning Storm if you can, just because of the fact that they can pop monsters as well, so you deal with problems more easily. And also I've seen the rise in popularity of Cyclone, and it makes a lot of sense. And that's what I also wanted to mention was, for example, if we look at the LCS deck lists, people just started running one Cosmic Cyclone in the main, and it's obviously because it's a Mystic Mine out and because it outs the Scythe lock. So if you're planning on running Backrow removal, I would heavily suggest to put in Cyclones just because of the Scythe lock, because it's so annoying and so many decks use it. Like I've seen it in Adamantia lists, I've seen it in Invoke lists, obviously Phantom Knights and Virtual World. So like if a deck can fit it in, I'm pretty sure that the players are just gonna put the Scythe lock in because it's very free. So I think we need to combat that, but by just using Cosmic Cyclone and getting rid of the problem altogether, since it never hits the graveyard, it's not gonna get revived, it's so good, it just gets banished, and that's it. And also just having one copy for the Mystic Mine out, I think that's so smart, because Mystic Mine also, and now I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but Mystic Mine is something that's been seen in like side decks and also main decks, here and there, because Invoked, I guess I should say IDS overall can afford to run it. Also, Literlust can easily OTK over it, so they do not care. Sky Striker runs it, and other decks can put it in as well if it works with the archetype. So, but just having that one Mystic Mine out, I think that's very smart, because you just legit throw game one if you don't have it. So yeah, I would suggest on Cyclones for sure for the format to come, but obviously things change all the time. And then another card I wanted to mention was Red Reboot, because I feel like if a deck can afford to run it with, like I said before, the extra deck free, the side deck space freeing up, I think we should be running Red Reboot in the decks that we can run it, because it's just so free and it's Red Reboot, and why would you not run it, basically. So this is still a staple, and yeah, moving on to the other things. So the hand traps, like I've said before, they have started to lose impact, and it's interesting how long something like Ash has been a staple, and it's been so good, and now it's not anymore, and it's weird. I was always afraid to cut something like Ash, something so generic, and then I started seeing how it does nothing when I draw it, and I just felt so weird about it, but now I cut it, I feel much better without it. But the other hand traps I wanted to mention was Droll. Like I said before, very meta specific, but the past couple of metas, everybody could just use Droll freely and get away with it, against Drytron and just Lyrilusk now, or it used to be Pendulums way back when. Droll would hit it a lot, and it wouldn't matter that it used 3 slots in the side deck because it had a very big of an impact. And now I feel like it's a card that is still very much worth running. And then also the other card would be Lancia. So these are like the two staples that I've seen in the side decks all the time, Droll and Lancia. So I think it's still good, and it's been good for like a couple years now probably. So against Virtual World, against anything Tri-Brigade, against I guess Sword Soul, if they're using the Tenyi variant, like it does something against all of these decks, but then again also other things do a lot. So Lancia is like one of those things that I feel like is the most cuttable in a side deck if you don't have enough space, but I think it's still worth running if you do, so I hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's about it for Lancia. Another one would be Gamma. So I've seen Gamma being moved to the side deck a lot, just because in the main deck it doesn't always do enough, especially if you're going first, and it's kind of like bricky and not so good, and obviously not every deck can run it also. I think but that's just me personally, I think it's a lot to dedicate 4 side deck slots to it, but I guess if you're specifically preparing and gearing up for a certain meta, I think it would be a good call, so consider Gamma as one of your options as well. Then the next one would be Nibiru. I think the impact is huge if used correctly, if used against the correct deck that you want to put Nibiru in against, but I think that so many decks establish negates beforehand that it's like, I'm a bit iffy on it. It's like, for example, Lyrilusk board forces you. Virtual World board can establish Crystal Wing. Also, Sword Soul can establish the Baron. And it's like, if you want to put it in, you're going to have to risk people sort of tailoring their boards and their plays towards specifically playing around Nibiru, so it's something you just need to choose if you want to do it or not. But with Nibiru, I think it's so funny that, you know, people start to like not respect it anymore because they don't side it, and then if nobody sides it, there's this one person or two people and they're like, okay, we're just gonna side Nibiru, and then they punish everybody because nobody respects it. So it's like, just make your choice accordingly to what you're gonna be playing, to which decks you assume you're gonna be playing against. I think it has impact, but you just need to use it correctly. You need to decide. So yeah, that's pretty much it for Nibiru. Then the next two I wanted to just quickly discuss was Ghost Ogre and also Token Collector. So Ghost Ogre is like, you know, it's not worth running, I would say, but it's surprising to me how much of application it has in this format that we're currently in. Like, if you legit go through the best decks, it can punish a lot of things, like a lot of cards in those decks. It can just hit and make sort of an impact, but I would still not say it's worth running necessarily. And as for Token Collector, I think that if your meta is Sword Soul heavy, I would definitely side it because it hurts them a lot. If I was going to an event and assume there's gonna be Sword Soul people there, I would most likely side it. And also there's obviously decks that can just mill it, like Beatrice, and also Virtual World mill it with Beatrice, and the same with Drytron if you're running it. Like, it's still an option, very specific one, but it is an option if you want to mill it with Beatrice and just get it in the graveyard to use its effect. This is also cool. So with decks like these, I guess you could also afford to run less copies of it, so then you have more space for other cards. And then the last thing I wanted to discuss just briefly with you, and it's mostly from what I've seen from the LCS and what I've seen just happening and what I've seen people run, different main deck techs, basically. So we've discussed how going second power cards are sort of overpowering the hand traps, and we've discussed Mystic Mine, we've discussed Cosmic Cyclone in the main. The next card I wanted to discuss with you was Small World. So it's so interesting to me how people did not see on release how good it's gonna be. Like, the card is legit, it has had potential since forever, like you could tell. So you need to, like I've said, I think I mentioned this in the previous video, just get your copies because the card is really good. And I've seen it in lists like Adamantia, I've seen it in Invoked, I've seen it in Lyrilusk, and it's just everywhere. So this is a card that legit is gaining so much popularity, and I think you need to be aware of the interactions. Just go through it and sort of prepare, because you can be just surprised by what people do with the card. Then we've also mentioned Scythe, how it's being played pretty much anywhere it could be played. Like, to be perfectly honest, it's not something I condone, like, necessarily. It's not something I'm a big fan of. I guess this is the formats now, so whatever, you know, I'm not gonna complain. But yeah, it's something that I've seen being played a lot. So yeah, just run Cosmic Cyclone and hope you draw it and get rid of it. So that's all I could say, basically. And then the other card I also noticed a lot was There Can Be Only One. It's annoying. It's just horrible. But when you have a deck like Birds or something like that just gets overpowered by a card like this, I guess Sky Striker and Invoked and things like that can just run it, and you need to deal with it. So yeah, just be ready for cards like that. And then the last two cards I wanted to mention, one of them was Talents, so it became much more accessible. It's still a good card, but you know, I would never probably run it at 3 copies because I just don't like to draw it too much. And I would still consider putting it in. For example, I still have it in the Birds deck. I'm gonna test it out some more. From now, I didn't see it that often to necessarily elaborate on how good it is in the deck. But yeah, it's still an option if you wish to run it. Like, it's still okay. Like I said, I wouldn't play more than 2 copies, but basically it's funny how hand traps just started to not be that good, and therefore rendering Talents almost useless. So if the format continues in the direction where people just don't play hand traps, I think we're all just gonna start cutting Talents as a result of that. And then the last card, so we have come to the end, the last card I wanted to briefly discuss with you was Crossout Designator. So there is no Crossout Designator to be seen, like, legit anywhere. Like, yeah, people run it like in certain types of decks, but in the top decks, in the top deck list, there is no Crossout. Like, there is nowhere to be seen. And like I've said before, my theory on crossout is that it's not that impactful in the best decks because they do enough on their own and they can play cards like Call By, which I still feel is better than crossout, or even Talents, and then the rogue decks can afford to run something like crossout to just be more protected, and I still stand behind this entire theory. Yeah, it's just, I would say that, like, get it if the price is okay and just have a playset ready for yourself, because there is going to come a point where we're all gonna play it probably, but for the time being I think it's okay to just have it sit in the binder and just slowly wait for the correct format to come. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully this video helped you to just highlight some of the things that you can play, some of the reasoning behind it if you see it in different deck lists, to know how you can build your decks. So what I would usually do is, this is just a bonus tip since we're talking about side deck, how I would build it, and I'm not trying to preach anything to you, please, because I'm not a great side deck builder yet myself. But what I like to do is just, I write down all of the matchups, and I write down what I'm gonna put in, what I'm gonna take out, according to how my main deck is built, so I know how many copies of something to put in, how much of an impact something is going to make. Because if I see that all the time I want to cut, for example, 5 to 6 cards from the main deck that I can afford to take out, then I'm just gonna prepare that many copies for things of things in the side deck. So hopefully that makes sense. Like I said, I'm not the greatest at this, so I don't want to elaborate on it too much, but this would be, I think, a good piece of advice to just legit get ready, write things down, write down everything, for example, that you've seen in this video. Just take notes of the cards that you feel like are, you know, impactful, and then just choose which you want to run. Get some backrow removal, get some things that affect specific decks in your meta, going second cards, just yeah, just things that you feel like are necessary. So I guess that would be it. Like I said, if you learned anything, if you found this video helpful in any way, make sure to give me a like, a sub, check out Twitch as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.